My stepmother looked my father straight in the eye and said, "It's her or me. Either she moves out of this house and out of your life, or I leave." He chose her. That night I packed my things quietly. What they didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this for months, and the consequences I set in motion were going to be worse than they expected. It began 3 months after Mom died, when Dad married Heather, a woman who had circled him for a long time. On a stormy night, with rain against my window, I overheard an ultimatum that broke my world. Either you cut your daughter out, or you choose me. When he chose Heather, I packed in silence. I'd already made plans. Heather thought she'd won, but some wins are just the start of the end. My relationship with my father, Thomas Collins, had always been close. As a successful architect, he'd designed some of Boston's notable buildings, yet he always made time for me. We had Sunday pancake rituals, summer sailing trips along the Massachusetts coast, and he never missed my milestones, even when buried in work. When I graduated from Boston University with a finance degree, the pride in his eyes mattered more than anything. My mother, Rebecca, was our family center, a beloved pediatrician who balanced Dad's creativity with steady practicality. They were that rare couple that still looked at each other like newlyweds after 25 years. The way Dad looked at her set my bar for relationships. Then everything changed. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer, and it progressed quickly. Within 6 months, she was gone. I was 25 and working in finance in New York, but I flew home every weekend during her illness. Dad fell apart. The man who built structures that reached the sky collapsed inward. He stopped designing, barely ate, and sat for hours in Mom's garden, silent. The grief counselor reminded us everyone heals differently. That's why I tried to withhold judgment when Dad started seeing Heather 8 months after Mom's funeral. Heather was the new office manager at his firm, 15 years younger at 42, with carefully maintained looks. I met her at the firm's Christmas party. Dad introduced her as a friend, but the way his hand lingered on her back felt different. "Your father talks about you all the time," Heather said with a bright smile but measured eyes. "He's proud of your work in finance." I've always found numbers intimidating. Dad looked eager for us to connect. I nodded, ignoring the alarm bell. I tried to accept their relationship for Dad's sake, but it moved fast. By month 3, Heather seemed to live in our house. By month 5, Dad spoke about moving forward. After 6 months, he called to say they were engaged. "Amber, I know this is fast," he said, voice mixed with guilt and excitement. "At my age, you realize life is short." Heather makes me happy again. The wedding was small and rushed. Nothing like my parents' celebration. Standing beside Dad as his best woman, while he pledged himself to someone in an expensive dress, felt surreal. Aunt Julia squeezed my hand during the vows and whispered that Mom would want him to be happy, though her tone suggested concern. After the wedding, I made a choice. My lease in New York was ending, and my company approved remote work, so I told Dad I'd come home for a few months to support him during the transition. But I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong with Heather. The warning signs were small at first. Heather rearranged Mom's kitchen within a week, calling the old layout inefficient, a kitchen Mom had designed. Then she made suggestions about my childhood room, saying it would be a perfect home gym since I was only staying temporarily. Dad looked uneasy, but said nothing. A pattern formed. Heather proposed changes. Dad hesitated, then gave in. It felt like watching someone slowly erase my mother and my home. I worked as a financial analyst and converted the sunroom into a home office, to stay somewhat removed. My friends from college, Ryan and Jessica, who still lived in Boston, were my relief valve when tensions rose. "She's just marking territory," Jessica suggested over wine. Ryan was blunt. He didn't trust someone who used that many filters and selfies. He'd seen Heather's Instagram before she restricted it. 3 wealthy boyfriends in 5 years, all older. The alarms got louder, but I wanted to believe these were normal adjustments. As winter turned to spring, the home atmosphere tightened. I began to wonder if my being there actually protected Dad instead of intruding on his marriage. One night I overheard them arguing about money. Dad had always been generous, but cautious. Those were values he passed to me. From their bedroom came Heather's sharp voice. I don't understand why we need to consult Amber about remodeling the master bath. It's our house now, Thomas. Our decisions. Dad replied, tired. Amber has a right to be involved in how those funds are used. Their voices dropped. I retreated to my room with a knot in my stomach, convinced this was just the start. By summer, Heather's efforts to claim the house quickened. One morning I came home from a run to find Mom's antique grandfather clock missing from the entryway. It didn't match our new aesthetic, Heather explained, pointing to a modern piece that replaced it. It's safe in storage. Dad avoided my eyes. That night I found the clock listed for sale on an antique site. When I confronted Heather, she said it was for insurance valuation. The listing vanished. The next day, photos of Mom slowly disappeared from walls, replaced by wedding portraits of Heather and Dad. The garden Mom tended for 20 years was ripped up for a modern design. Heather said needed less upkeep. Dad's objections weakened with every change. One dinner Heather mentioned redecorating my room once I moved back to New York. You're almost 30, Amber. Don't you want your own life? She said. Dad murmured that I was welcome to stay as long as I liked. But Heather smoothly added she worried about career advancement, working remotely. A recurring theme. Her comments became sharper. My clothes left in the dryer would go missing, then reappear damp. My lactose-free milk got thrown out despite valid dates. Small things with plausible explanations. Until they weren't. More worrying were the financial signs. Heather pushed for joint access to accounts, including Mom's life insurance money Dad had set aside for retirement. Don't you trust me? She asked, whenever he hesitated. My analyst instincts kicked in when I found credit card statements in the recycling. Heather had racked up over $30,000 since their marriage on designer clothing, spa treatments, and unexplained advances. When I tried to raise these concerns with Dad privately, his defenses flared. She makes me happy, he'd say, hurt and defensive. I'm allowed to move on. Those talks always ended the same. Dad withdrew behind guilt and a fear of being alone. The situation escalated after a weekend I spent in New York. In my absence, Heather had moved my things into the guest room and turned my childhood bedroom into a meditation studio with expensive equipment and mirrored walls. We didn't think you'd mind, she said sweetly. But the worst was Mom's jewelry box. A hand-carved wooden chest Dad had commissioned from a Japanese artisan for their anniversary. It contained pieces Mom had left specifically to me, including sapphire earrings. Dad later told me he'd come home to find Heather wearing the earrings at dinner. Those were my mother's, I said, heart racing. Heather replied that Thomas had said I could borrow them for a charity gala. Later I heard her on the phone. It's going slower than I expected. The daughter is still here watching everything like a hawk. But he's coming around, another few months, and we can move forward. When she noticed me listening, she ended the call and smiled. That night I called Ryan and Jessica. She's up to something, I said over pie at our diner. Jessica, practical, suggested hiring a private investigator. Ryan agreed. His cousin had a similar situation and the wife had hidden marriages and financial motives. Their concern matched my suspicions. It was time to learn who Heather, formerly Heather Mitchell, really was. I began a methodical investigation, using the verification resources my firm used for clients. I found troubling data. Heather was born Heather Wilson, had changed her name multiple times, and had a financial history with 3 bankruptcies in 15 years. A foreclosure and multiple maxed-out cards. She had a pattern of relationships with wealthy older men after each financial setback. Through social media, I identified a previous husband, real estate developer Richard Daniels in Chicago, and found his son Michael. After a cautious exchange, he agreed to a video call. He found another one, Michael said grimly, when I explained. He told me Heather was with his father when his father was 62. Within 2 years she'd convinced him to alter his will, liquidate retirement funds for investments that never happened, and push away family who raised red flags. By the time he realized it, over $600,000 had been transferred to accounts his father couldn't access. The divorce was ugly. He died months later. The doctor said heart failure, but Michael believed it was a broken heart. He shared court documents that showed a pattern of manipulation and financial exploitation that mirrored what I was seeing with Dad. Armed with that history, I needed evidence from my own house. I put a small security camera in my bedroom after noticing items moved when I was out. The footage showed Heather searching drawers, photographing financial documents, and trying combinations on a small safe where I kept important papers. I began documenting missing items, manipulative conversations, and financial inconsistencies. I looked into Massachusetts tenant laws and considered legal protection should Heather push me out. My lawyer friend Stephanie advised creating paper trails for everything and urged me to act to protect Dad's assets. While keeping a normal front at home, I protected what I could. I put my most important possessions in a safety deposit box, opened a separate bank account, and slowly transferred savings Heather couldn't find. I researched apartments in Boston and New York and prepared to move quickly if needed. Crucially, I secured documents predating Mom's death: wills, financial statements, and letters Mom had written during her illness. Those were both legally important and irreplaceable memories. One rainy afternoon, I got a call from Dad's longtime business partner, Martin. "Amber, I'm concerned," he said. Dad was talking about early retirement and selling his share of the firm, something he'd never considered. The terms undervalued his contribution. Martin said the change wasn't like him. When I asked why, he mentioned Heather's suggestion: they travel while they still could. The timing felt rushed, and Dad had been excited about the Henderson Tower project for years. I added Martin's concerns to my file. That evening at dinner, I brought up the Henderson project to watch Dad's reaction. He avoided my eyes and said he was thinking about stepping back. Heather, placing her hand over his, said Thomas had worked hard and should enjoy his life, and mentioned 6 months in Europe. The pattern was clear: isolate Dad, liquidate assets, and then disappear. I realized I might be the only person standing between my father and serious financial loss. I finalized a contingency plan. I needed irrefutable evidence and the right moment to present it. Confronting Heather outright would likely push Dad deeper into her control. The breaking point came on an evening that began like any other. I'd spent the day researching short-term rentals and speaking with a forensic accountant to trace Heather's transactions. For dinner, Heather attempted Mom's lasagna poorly and chattered about redecorating for Thanksgiving in August. "I donated Mom's decorations to Goodwill last week," she said when I mentioned Mom's hand-painted pieces. Dad flinched, but stayed silent. I set my fork down. "Those were our family decorations," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Heather's face hardened. "This is our house now," she replied. "Thomas and I make the decisions." I pushed back. "It's been our home for 28 years. You've been here 10 months. I told Dad I was worried about heirlooms being sold, the sudden retirement plans, and the fact he'd been checking up on me at work. Dad interrupted, looking betrayed. My father interrupted, looking hurt. Martin sounded worried. "You never mentioned retiring early before, Thomas." Heather slammed her wine glass down. "This is exactly the problem, Thomas. She's trying to come between us. She can't accept you've moved on. You have a new life now." "That's not true," I protested. "Dad, I want you to be happy. I'm worried about losing your inheritance? About not having Daddy's attention to yourself anymore?" Heather cut in, panicked. "Heather, please," Dad tried. "No, Thomas. This ends tonight." Heather stood, her voice rising. "Ever since we married, she's undermined me, questioned me, made me feel unwelcome in my own home. I've tried to be patient. She's grieving, but it's been almost 4 years. I can't live like this. Don't use my mother to manipulate this." I stood. "This isn't grief. This is erasing her and isolating Dad from people who care about him." Heather turned to Dad, tears appearing. "This is what I deal with when you're not here. Accusations and disrespect. I can't take it." Dad looked trapped. "Amber, Heather is my wife. You need to respect that." "I have tried," I said. Have you noticed your friends don't come around? You're talking about abandoning the firm you built. Family heirlooms keep disappearing. Enough, Heather shouted. I won't be accused like a criminal in my own house. Either she leaves this house and your life, or I do. I mean it. Silence fell. I watched Dad process the ultimatum, waiting for him to refuse. Instead, he looked resigned. Amber, he said softly, maybe it would be better if you moved back to New York. You're an adult with a career. Maybe we all need space. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. After everything, after I'd tried to protect him, he chose her demand over our relationship. I see, I managed steady, despite my racing heart. It's not that I don't want you in my life, Dad continued without meeting my eyes. But this situation isn't working. Heather is my wife now. You need to respect our marriage. Respect goes both ways, Dad. Heather smiled triumphantly. You could stay with a friend while you look for an apartment. With a security deposit, won't we, Thomas? I watched the woman who'd forced her way into our lives and the father who'd fallen under her sway. Fighting then would only push him further away and strengthen Heather's hold. I understand, I said finally. I'll make arrangements. Dad looked relieved, a reaction that hurt more than anger would have. We can talk tomorrow. This doesn't mean I don't want you in my life. I excused myself and walked calmly to my room, closed the door, and could hear them continue arguing through the wall. Heather's voice was soothing and victorious. I texted Ryan and Jessica identical messages. Operation Backup activated. Need a place tonight? Both offered immediately. I chose Jessica's, better security. I packed methodically, taking essentials, irreplaceable photos, documents, and the few pieces of Mom's jewelry I'd hidden. I used the emergency bag I'd prepared weeks earlier. I left a short note for Dad. I love you too much to watch what's happening. When you can talk without Heather, call me. I'll always be your daughter. At 11:30 p.m., with Heather and Dad asleep, I carried my bags to the car and drove away, tears finally falling, as the house shrank in my rearview mirror. Beneath the pain was resolve. This retreat wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Heather thought she'd won, but she had no idea what I'd already started. Jessica's guest room became my war room. That first week was brutal. Processing betrayal, while keeping composure to execute my plan, took everything I had. Dad texted daily. Hope you're settling in. Let us know if you need help moving your things. We should have dinner soon. Notably absent was any admission that he'd accepted Heather's ultimatum. No apology, just an expectation I'd apologize and things would return to Heather's normal. I kept replies minimal, keeping contact without revealing my activities. Distance was necessary. Heather couldn't suspect what I was doing. I met with Stephanie, a lawyer and friend who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. Legally, your father is competent and can make his own choices, she said, reviewing Heather's history and my documentation. There's nothing we can do unless she actually steals, but we can take preventive steps to protect assets. She asked about wills and trusts. That led me to locate copies of my parents' estate documents. Mom had been methodical. Mr. Greenberg, their lawyer, had files. Although Dad updated his will after marrying Heather, some trusts set up during my parents' marriage contained irrevocable provisions that couldn't be changed, protections built into the estate. My investigation broadened with precision. I located and interviewed two of Heather's previous partners, an investment banker from Seattle and a surgeon from Miami. Both told the same story: whirlwind romance, rapid marriage, isolation from family, questionable financial decisions, and major losses when the relationship ended. She's refined her technique, the banker said. With your father, she's playing a longer game. I created a detailed timeline, cross-referencing Heather's suspicious actions with Dad's behavioral and financial shifts. The pattern was undeniable and alarming. Martin from Dad's firm called again. Worried the retirement paperwork Dad had started would liquidate his equity at a significant discount. He'd tried talking, but Dad insisted it was his choice. While building the case, I created a new life. I rented a small, secure apartment, under an LLC, to make it harder for Heather to find me. I explained to my sympathetic boss that I needed flexibility for family matters and kept working remotely. Jessica, a social worker, helped me process the trauma while keeping me focused. Ryan, who worked in cybersecurity, secured my digital life and monitored accounts shared with Dad. Their support was essential. I limited contact with Dad to carefully managed public lunches every 2 weeks, never mentioning Heather. I focused on positive memories and his projects. He expected confrontation. Instead, he got calm reminders of Mom. Will you visit Mom's favorite vineyard in Montepilliano? I'd ask. Small, non-accusatory reminders planted seeds of memory. While the evidence file grew, the forensic accountant traced troubling transactions. Heather had opened multiple new credit cards and charged tens of thousands in a few months. Purchases focused on easily resold luxury items, jewelry, watches, designer bags. She'd been communicating with a real estate agent in the Cayman Islands, asking about permanent residency and banking regulations there, not vacation properties. By the time I was in exile, Dad's retirement paperwork was processed. The house was being prepped for sale, and Heather was quietly moving valuable items out in small amounts to avoid immediate alarm. The case was substantial. I compiled a comprehensive file for Dad: evidence, testimonials, financial records, and a clear timeline. Stephanie prepared a legal briefing outlining emergency measures. Everything was ready. All I needed was the right catalyst. Indisputable proof that even Dad couldn't rationalize away. Stephanie warned again: approach too soon, and Heather would paint me as jealous and manipulative. We needed evidence she couldn't deny. On a rainy Tuesday in October, as they finalized Italy plans, the moment came. Dad called, voice shaking the way it had only when Mom died. Amber, I think I've made a terrible mistake. Can you meet me? Not at the house. I suggested Murphy's Diner, our old breakfast spot. He agreed. I took a back booth. When he walked in, he looked years older, shoulders slumped, dark circles under his eyes. Thanks for coming, he said. What happened? I asked, gently. He showed me screenshots of bank statements, large withdrawals he hadn't authorized. I never made over $200,000 in 2 months, he said. He'd found discrepancies while checking paperwork for their Italy stay. In the safe, his wife's explanations didn't add up. He showed me messages from Heather's unlocked phone, with someone named Marcus, discussing finalizing things and offshore accounts. He'd also discovered ownership documents for a Grand Cayman property and a passport with a different birth date than Heather had given them. He'd found that Mom's diamond necklace and sapphire ring were missing. Heather had claimed they were at the jeweler, but the jeweler had no record. He'd confronted her. She called him pathetic for snooping and said it was her turn after watching her mother struggle financially. She'd even threatened to portray him as senile, weaponizing my grandfather's dementia history. Dad admitted how afraid he'd been of being alone, how Heather made him feel wanted and alive, and how he hadn't seen what was happening. You're not her victim, but I want to be her last, he said suddenly. Resolved. I'd prepared for this. I pulled out a flash drive and walked him through the evidence. Heather's prior relationships and financial schemes, testimonies from ex-partners, forensic accounting showing the money extraction, property research on countries with weak extradition, and Stephanie's legal analysis of Heather's methods. Dad listened, his architect's mind connecting the dots. You've been investigating all this time, he said. While I was pushing you away, you were protecting me. He admitted the ultimatum hadn't been a real choice. He'd been isolated. I fell for it completely. He looked at me with regret. What do we do now? I outlined the plan Stephanie and I had developed: immediate financial triage, change passwords, freeze joint accounts, secure valuables, then legal steps to protect what remained, and finally a confrontation supported by evidence and counsel. I warned he'd be manipulated again, made to doubt himself. Not anymore, he answered, firmer than I'd heard in months. Once you see a fatal flaw in a design, you can't unsee it. He agreed to meet Stephanie the next morning to implement the plan. As we left, Dad paused, eyes full of regret. I failed you, Amber. I failed your mother, Mom would understand grief, I said. She'd be proud we're fixing this together. For the first time in months, Dad hugged me properly, the way he used to. You're so much like her, strong, clear-headed, protective. I had good teachers, I replied. That night, I drove home feeling relief that Dad finally saw the truth. Vindication my suspicions were right. Anger at Heather's manipulation, and determination to help Dad recover financially and emotionally. The next morning Dad arrived at Stephanie's office with bags of documents, his laptop and several pieces of Mom's jewelry he'd secured while Heather was at the spa. He told Heather he was meeting Martin about the firm's sale to keep appearances. Stephanie walked us through immediate protective actions, security freezes on joint accounts, password changes, photographing and appraising remaining heirlooms, and documenting everything. Dad signed powers of attorney, giving me emergency authority if Heather tried retaliation. The aim wasn't just to stop further losses, but to build a legally defensible case to recover what had been taken. By afternoon, the immediate bleeding was contained. The next phase, confrontation and legal separation, would be harder. Stephanie warned Dad not to return to the house alone. Heather would be desperate once she realized access was cut off, and desperate people can be unpredictable. He nodded, grim. I've packed essentials in my car. I can stay near my office until this is resolved. As we finalized plans, Dad's phone buzzed with increasingly urgent texts from Heather asking about bank access issues. The reckoning had begun. It's beginning, Stephanie said. Are you ready for this, Thomas? Dad looked from the evidence files to me, then to the wedding ring he had just removed. More ready than I've been in a long time, he replied, voice steady. Let's end this. Reclaiming our lives. The confrontation with Heather was planned like a chess match. With Stephanie's guidance, we arranged to meet at her office, citing urgent paperwork. Heather arrived expecting to smooth over a banking mix-up. Her confident smile faltered when she saw Dad, me, Stephanie, her paralegal, and stacks of financial records spread on the table. What's this about? She asked, maintaining a polite tone while scanning the room. Please sit, Mrs. Collins, Stephanie said calmly. We need to go over serious financial discrepancies. What followed was denial, deflection, and manipulation. As Stephanie presented clear evidence, unauthorized transfers, hidden accounts, and a pattern of misappropriation, Heather cycled through confusion, outrage, and tears, and then resorted to accusation. This is your doing, she hissed at me. You've never accepted me. You're turning your father against me out of jealousy. Dad, who had stayed quiet during the presentation, finally spoke. Heather grasped for his hand, pleading that the Grand Cayman account, the passport, and the missing heirlooms were all misunderstandings. Dad pulled his hand back. The only misunderstanding was my belief in who you were, he said. It's over. Stephanie served Heather with divorce papers and a court order freezing assets pending investigation. Heather left without a scene, her face a cold, calculated mask. This isn't finished, she said quietly. You have no idea what you've done. Her threat proved empty. The legal process that followed was methodical. The evidence, bolstered by testimony from prior victims who came forward, led the district attorney's office to open a fraud investigation spanning multiple states. Recovering assets was difficult. Much of the diverted money had been spent or moved into accounts that were hard to trace. Dad's retirement savings were significantly affected, though irrevocable trusts set up during my parents' marriage protected certain funds. The family home, which had nearly been listed for sale, remained ours, but it took months before Dad could return comfortably. In the meantime, he stayed with me in my spare bedroom. Emotionally, recovery was slower than the physical restoration. We spent weekends restoring Mom's touch to the house, rehanging her artwork, replacing family photos, replanting her garden with her favorite perennials. Each act felt like reclaiming our home and our memory of her. Dad began therapy to work through the betrayal and unresolved grief that had left him vulnerable. Progress was gradual but visible. Small moments like a genuine laugh or a call to Martin about returning to work on a consulting basis marked improvement. Our Sunday traditions returned, sometimes at home and sometimes at Mom's favorite restaurants. About 6 months after Heather left, Dad raised his glass at dinner. "To my brilliant, stubborn daughter who saved me from myself," he said, eyes clear. "And to Rebecca, who raised a daughter strong enough to stand her ground." I clinked my glass and said, "I had good teachers." A surprising development followed. I connected with several of Heather's prior victims and their families. What began as information gathering evolved into a support network, and then an advocacy group focused on financial exploitation in relationships. Michael Daniels, the son of one of Heather's previous partners, became involved, using his legal experience to help strengthen protections for vulnerable people. Dad's healing continued. He reconnected with friends Heather had pushed away, rebuilt professional ties, and after a year, began dating cautiously, a healthy, measured step. "I'm having coffee with Catherine from the hospital foundation board," he told me one day. "Just friends, but it's nice to have conversation again." I told him Mom would approve. Professionally, the experience changed me. I stayed in Boston, accepted a promotion, and shifted my focus to fraud detection at my firm, helping others identify and prevent schemes like Heather's. 18 months after our confrontation, the district attorney emailed, Heather had been arrested in Arizona for attempting a similar scheme with a retired surgeon. That potential victim had recognized the pattern thanks to an awareness campaign our advocacy group had launched with senior protection organizations. "Your work made a difference," the assistant DA wrote. One evening, sitting in Mom's garden, watching the sunset over the trees she planted, I asked Dad, "Do you think we were naive?" He thought for a moment. "Not naive, maybe too trusting," he said. "Trust is necessary for the world to function. Now we balance it with awareness." I thought of Mom's saying about bridges, designed for beauty, built for strength. Dad smiled and nodded. The experience was painful. Heather intended to destroy our family and nearly succeeded. Instead, her actions strengthened bonds that ultimatums couldn't break. By trying to force Dad to choose, she ultimately ensured he'd choose what mattered most: family integrity and authentic connection. I learned that the most powerful response to manipulation can be strategic patience, stepping back to observe, document, and act decisively when the time is right. It's not surrender, it's a different kind of strength. Your turn, as I share this story. Consider whether someone you know has been isolated from friends and family, or is making sudden financial decisions that feel out of character. Trust your instincts. They often protect you from dangers your conscious mind hasn't fully processed. If this story resonated, please share your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Have you ever made a difficult strategic retreat to win a larger battle? How did you manage complex family dynamics during a crisis? Your insights might help someone facing something similar. If you found value in this story, please like and subscribe to support the channel and share these lessons. Remember, sometimes the strongest choice is not immediate confrontation, but preparing wisely and standing firm when the moment is right. Thank you for listening.